Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the opening remarks by Council Vice President Palermo.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. President. We are here again, obviously in these unknown times. I remember a couple months back, I had given the invocation and I had mentioned that we're on the edge of a pandemic and well, whether you believed it or not, here we are, right smack dab in the middle of it. So whether you believe it's real or not, it's here. Whether you know anybody who has come down with coronavirus, friend, family, colleague, or not, it's here. And it's financially for the city challenging as far as emotionally for a lot of us. People are needing tests, so if you need a test, get a test. If you don't, stay out of the line. Financially wise, obviously, not just the United States, the state of Nebraska and the city of Omaha, but we're going to be challenged, and I want to thank and grateful that we have the finance team we have, because I get asked all the time what we're going to do, and I honestly don't have an answer until we find out what we have. And also the emotional part, being a parent along with all of us up here, we know that the kids are home. We all have become teachers, or we have more respect than we had for teachers, because we all know that last day of kindergarten, how that should have been, or fourth grade or fifth grade or sixth grade or middle school, are the same with the high schoolers who didn't have the same graduation they should have had, or the college kids like my oldest, who was a senior at Wayne State, who graduated. It's different, right? We know how the party should be, who's going to be invited, where the cake's coming from, but it's emotionally different. And this is where we are. So whether you believe in it or not, here we are. We as a city, I can tell you, at least for me, that we are going to be okay. We're going to move on, and we're going to continue to do the work for the people, because that's what we're doing here today. Thank you.
An affidavit of publication is on file for this meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. We thank you for joining us here today. If you're in attendance, we ask that you please turn off or silence all electronic devices. Madam Clerk.
Oh, we have a proclamation.
We have a proclamation that Council Vice President Palermo has.
We do. Thank you, Mr. President. So what we have here is it's Omaha Public Works Week, so I'm going to read this proclamation, and I don't know if anybody's here to receive it, but if not, we will get it to them. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Omaha. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of the public works professionals, who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector. And whereas it is the public works interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and the children in the city of Omaha to gain knowledge of and to maintain a progressive interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2020 marks the 60th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, and whereas the Omaha Public Works Department has been internationally recognized for both its snow and ice control program and its graffiti abatement program. And whereas over the last year, Omaha Public Works professionals have completed the collection and responsible recycling or disposal of over 1,300,000 pounds of household hazardous waste. completed outreach on stormwater-related issues at over 250 events, maintained a less than 48-hour response time to traffic sign or signal-related issues while modernizing our signal infrastructure across the city, completed dozens of post-flood capital repair and upgrade projects to better serve our restored Papillion Creek Water Resource Recovery Facility, as well as other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Omaha hereby designates the week of May 17th through May 23rd, 2020 as Omaha Public Works Week. In witness whereof, the Omaha City Council has caused the official seal of the City of Omaha to be affixed on this 19th day of May 2020. Is anybody here from Public Works? If not, I'll give this to the clerk, and please find your way down to receive this.
Thank you.
All right, item 6, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for Flanagan Point located northeast of 180th and 4th Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 6 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Doug Kellner with TD2 here on behalf of the applicant, 10836 Old Mill Road. Available to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 6 is approved, 7-0. Item 7, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for North Streams located northeast of 204th and Q Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 7 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. With Jeff Elliott, one of the members of the applicant. This is a development on the northeast corner of 204th and Q. It's a relatively large development. It's got a companion case that's next. This is 174 acres that will be rezoned partly as mixed use and then partly as single-family residential housing. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding this particular project.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 7 is approved, 7-0. Item 8, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for South Streams with a waiver to section 5382B cul-de-sac length located southeast of 204th and Q Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 8 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. Again, with me today from Woodsonia is Jeff Elliott, a member of the applicant. This is, again, a companion case to the prior case, and this is 115 acres located at the southeast corner of 204th and Q Street. This project will be primarily all single-family residential housing at this point. There is some discussion this Friday with the planning department to see if there's a portion of this property that can be rezoned to mixed use, so you may see a little change coming forward with the final plat. But other than that, happy to answer any questions regarding this particular project.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 8 is approved, 7-0. Item 9, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for Jean Leahy Mall Replat 2 located northeast of 10th and Farnham Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 9 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Chris Koenig, HDR Engineering, 1917 South 67th Street, here on behalf of the proponent.
Applicant?
Applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 9 is approved, 7-0. Item 10, an ordinance to rezone property located at 1401 Jones Street from DS District to CBD District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 10 begins at this time. Madam Clerk, we have Mr. Hazy from E&A Consulting, 10909 Mill Valley Road, waiting in the queue.
And he's ready.
Mr. Hazy,
This
you're
is Kyle Hazy with E&A Consulting, 10909 Mill Valley Road, representing the applicant. Make myself available for any questions council might have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Second, roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 10 is approved, 6-0. Harding abstained. Item 11, an ordinance to rezone property located at 806 North 49th Street from R4 35 District to R4 District High Density. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 11 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 11 is approved, 7-0. Item 12, an ordinance to rezone property located at 3171-3175 Leavenworth Street from GI District to CC District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 12 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 12 is approved, 7-0. Items 13 and 14 can be considered together for property located southeast of Blair High Road and Rainwood Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 13, an ordinance to rezone this property from MU District to GI District. Item 14, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the IG Overlay District to incorporate this property into that district.
The public hearing on items 13 and 14 begin at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 13 and 14 are approved, 7-0. Items 15 to 17 can be considered together for property located at 4912 and 4914 Davenport Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. B is communications in opposition. Item 15, an ordinance to rezone this property from R4 35 District and R7 District to R7 District. Item 16, an ordinance to approve a PUR overlay district and an R7 district for this location. Item 17, an ordinance to approve an amendment to the future land use element of the master plan to change the future land use map from low-density residential for all the property listed on the agenda.
The public hearing on items 15 through 17 begin at this time. Are there any proponents?
Jeff Deal, 1717 Benton Street, here on behalf of the applicant. And did you have Steve Elkin on the Zoom or not?
We did not. He did not register.
Okay. All right. So I'm the architect on behalf of the architect, working for Elko Properties in Denver, Colorado. The owner couldn't be here today, obviously because of the travel and make it difficult. And I just want to go through some of the context for this project to explain how we got here and go through some of the details in case you have any questions later on. We're planning an apartment building in Dundee on Davenport Street between 49th and 50th Street. The north half of the street is primarily R7 zoned, and the south half of the street is primarily R8 zoned. If I can have the slides. What do I pull up?
Oh, that's on. You have the slides with you?
He just plugged them in.
Yeah,
On a
so-
USB?
No, it's not on Zoom. He wants to show them on the computer.
He had a flash drive, I think he put in.
Oh, we can just minimize. Can't we?
Or I could go, I don't need the slides.
That's
That's-
okay.
Minimize Zoom, can't we? And then have it. Yeah. Yep.
open the folder for your.
It might be on the folder. And then it should be on your flash drive.
Okay, we'll skip the slides.
Okay.
It wants to format the disk.
I wonder if you plugged it in.
Yeah, it's fine.
I wanna-
So the project is located on a block that's predominantly R7 and R8. The existing structures are all residential on this block, ranging from type of single-family homes that have been subdivided into multiple units, and multifamily housing. The multifamily housing is contiguous to our project, primarily to the east towards 49th Street. The first two items on the agenda are the rezoning of the R4 35 lot we would be using from R4 to R7, and the change of the future land use map from low-density residential to high-density residential. I think the context for both of these items is important, given that we're about 2 blocks from the 49th Street and Dodge Street orbit route. And the rezoning of those lots and the future land use, the increased density that would go along with it, would support the goals of the orbit route and sort of contribute to its future success. The actual project itself is a 21-unit market rate apartment building that would be targeting a demographic of renters who value a pedestrian-oriented neighborhood, access to services, and good transit. There's 3 floors above a 21-stall parking podium that would consist of mostly loft-style apartments and 1-bedroom apartments ranging in size from 500 square feet to 900 square feet. When we began the project, Steve had charged us with targeting 24 units. As the project began to take shape, we lost 3 of those units, so we're at that 21-unit mark right now. The design when it began was pretty modern in nature, with flat roofs, metal accent panels, and some larger compositional moves. But as we began working with the city staff, we've ended up with a more appropriate project, we believe, working under the PUR tool. What's developed since then is a more gabled roof that borrows from the surrounding context. We added a significant amount of brick and masonry to increase the quality of materials and break down the scale of the building. And we increased the size and quantity of the windows so each of the 4 principal elevations are more engaging with their neighbors. After our initial planning board meeting, we laid the case over to allow more time to meet with designated neighborhood representatives to address some of their design concerns. And we think we ended up with a better overall project because of that. Through those meetings, we accentuated the entrance to the building with a landscaped walk that ties directly to the sidewalk and leads to an entry that's slightly recessed into the building, and it's covered with a canopy that has a lot of visual weight and mass. And that seemed to be a pretty important item for the neighborhood, as it's a street with a lot of wraparound front porches. We also added a lot more craft and detail to how we were handling the brick and the masonry, something that would be more appropriate for an older historic neighborhood rather than more minimal modern details. The rest of the building is clad in a fiber cement panel that has a batten detail that breaks down the scale of the panel and also makes those panels feel more custom than they would otherwise. Finally, we believe this project is consistent with how the planned unit redevelopment tool was intended to work, given that much of the existing zoning code was developed for a more suburban application. The PR tool is effective at promoting quality infill development within the urban core and moves us toward meeting the goals of the master plan while giving developers the flexibility to make these types of projects feasible and completing projects that are appropriate to their surrounding neighborhoods. I'll be available for any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? We'll now move to the opponents who are registered to speak through Zoom. The first person is Mary Green, 5106 Western.
Hi there. I am here at the meeting. I am one of the co-presidents of the Dundee Memorial Park Neighborhood Association, and my co-president will also be giving our Neighborhood Association letter and comments. But I wanted to just also add that city council members have seen many letters attached to this proposal from the neighbors. There's quite a few neighbors who are protesting this development. And also you've seen lots of information included about Dundee being part of the National Register of Historic Places neighborhood. And we have a lot of historic buildings in this neighborhood. And I speak for the neighborhood when I say that protecting the character of Dundee is of great importance. And not that many years ago, Dundee was named one of the 10 best neighborhoods in the country. And that's an amazing designation and something we should be proud of and really strive to maintain. And that was given to us for a reason, and that's because of our historic buildings and the historic character of the neighborhood, and not having these big, giant block apartment buildings with no setbacks, et cetera, in the neighborhood. And especially in Dundee, we can increase density using single-family accessory buildings, along with duplexes and townhouses. Those are ways that would be beneficial and increase density, but still helping us maintain the historic nature of the neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood without changing that balance. But putting in an oversized apartment building that benefits the developers but takes away from the historic character of the neighborhood, that is going to, over time, cause us to lose everything that makes Dundee a special neighborhood. That's why so many of us choose to live in this neighborhood, and I think we need to really work to protect and maintain that for this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Sarah Nelson, 4806 Underwood. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Sarah.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Sarah Nelson. My address is 4806 Underwood Avenue. As Mary said, I am speaking on behalf of the Dundee Memorial Park Association. Her and I are co-presidents of the association, and we've heard many concerns from our neighbors about this project. And I think that the last letter that I emailed Council Member Festerson about this morning, I emailed it probably at 9 o'clock, so I can understand that it may not have made it into the documents. So I'll just go ahead and read it right now for you all. It says, I am writing to you on behalf of the Dundee Memorial Park Association. We as an association strongly oppose the redevelopment noted above at 49th and Davenport. We are asking that the developers follow the guidelines in Omaha's Urban Design Handbook stating new development be designed to conserve and or enhance the historic character of existing urban districts. These guidelines should be followed in all cases, but especially when developers are asking for tax incremental financing and demolishing historic homes. The size of this building does not fit within our historic district boundaries. Historical apartment buildings in our neighborhood have courtyards and landscape setbacks from the street. This building unfortunately does not. The proposed PUR overlay does not support the preservation of the character of our historic neighborhood. The PUR allows for the proposed building to be unacceptably close to north and west lot lines. The planning board approved this aspect of the PUR because the properties, quote unquote, the properties to the north, east, and west were zoned R7. While it's true that these lots are zoned R7, the physical form of the properties north and west do not match the R7 zoning. The properties north and west are two-story duplexes and triplexes, not large high-density buildings. As an association, we want to eliminate the PUR from the proposed development. The high-density nature of this proposed development does not fit within the neighborhood's character. We appreciate the developer's willingness to include the association in the conversations about entrance design, brick facade, and the addition of larger windows, but the core issue is that this building is much too large. Thank you.
Thank you. The next opponent is Daniel Rock, 307 South 53rd Street, by phone. Please proceed. Mr. Rock, we see you, but you're on the phone, ready to go. We can continue, and then maybe Mr. Festerson, who has his light on, could call him if he wishes. Okay. Are there any other opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. And I appreciate the testimony from both proponents and opponents today. And I have heard from both of them, and I've been watching this project as it's come through the process for quite some time now through Planning Board and with the Planning Department. And I find it's hard for me to reconcile it a little bit in the respect that I think the developer has done their job in terms of abiding by the criteria and working with the neighborhood on some of their concerns, as was noted. And they have met the department's recommendations, and they were approved by the Planning Board 7-0. And the current property there is, there's a vacant lot and a house that's not in great shape. And when we talk about transit-oriented development, which I know we'll have further conversations about as a body in coming months, this is fairly close to Dodge Street, where we'll have some new transit happening shortly. But when you speak with the neighbors and the neighborhood association, I understand their perspective too, which is at times, especially in Dundee, there's concerns about apartments overtaking single-family homes. There's definitely concerns and opinions about architecture and compatibility with an historic district, and it is one. And I still think, as I've noted here in previous cases, that we still aren't all talking the same language when we talk about transit-oriented development and density. We had a case in Blackstone recently that I voted against. It was similar in nature in the respect that I think in principle, we all believe density is good. Increased density is helpful, especially in historic districts and near transit. But what does that really mean? There's a missing middle housing perspective that wants more affordable housing and more density, but not this kind of density. There's neighborhoods who generally like density, but prefer single-family homes and something that's characteristic of a neighborhood. That's the case here. And there's also, a planning department who is trying to encourage density around transit development and sees this coming down the pike and supports things like we have here today in terms of additional apartment units. So it's hard for me to reconcile all that in this particular case. I did just spend about an hour with the planning department talking about the future land use development element that's going to come to the city council likely this fall, and how that pertains to this case, because it does conceive of a transit-oriented development zone up and down Dodge Street, all the way to West Roads, and through this area. And in this particular area would cover this particular property, which is about 2 blocks off of Dodge Street. But I think what's still murky in my mind is where is that right balance, especially in a neighborhood like Dundee. And I'm not sure we have that figured out yet. At least I don't have that figured out yet in my head as it applies to what's coming later. So for this particular case, although it's ahead of that land use element coming and should be judged on its own merits, I don't think I'm comfortable with it yet today. That's my analysis of it so far. I'll yield the floor right now for others who may have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Festerson. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think most people know I still go to the pre-meetings for the planning board because everything that's on that agenda ends up on our agenda. So I've kind of been following this case as well. And it's unfortunate the developer couldn't be here because although they live in Denver for most of the time, they're in a way a resident of Omaha in that they own another property in this neighborhood, which is, I think everyone knows, KFAB, the KFAB block. So they've got a vested interest. They're invested in the neighborhood. I look at the pictures of this, and first of all, I understand that one of the, with the zoning issue of R7 and the structures that currently exist on those currently zoned R7 may not be anything but single family, but by right, they could be something otherwise, and they just would have to come in to pull a building permit as long as it's compliant with the regulations of the R7s. So the house that exists is not historic. The other portion that's going to be built on is an empty lot, and I know this was, I'm looking at the zoning board minutes, and it's probably one of the longer transcriptions of any planning board case I can remember. So I understand that there are feelings and emotions and arguments both for and against this, but I think that the developer has worked with not only the neighborhood and the neighbors and the stakeholders. They've worked with the planning department to make sure that they are, meeting the intent of what's being proposed. And I think they've come a long way in trying to balance those out. And I think to have the investment in the neighborhood, I think will be a positive thing. Again, I say this a lot in some of these cases where if there's opposition from the existing neighbors, you have to remember that the people who are going to live here, they want the same thing that you enjoy today. They understand the nature of the neighborhood, and they want to be a part of that neighborhood. They want to live, work, and play there just as you do today. And I think they, both the people who are residing there as well as the structure itself will be additive to the neighborhood. Some people may like the architecture, some people may not. I mean, architecture is a matter of taste in some regard. And again, I think the developer has worked with the comments of the neighborhood, albeit I acknowledge they're not exactly what the neighborhood likes, but they are working toward that, having some compromise as well as being able to build a product that's going to be both attractive to the neighborhood as well as attractive to those who reside in it. So I will be supportive of this, and I understand Mr. Festerson's weighing his decision based upon his analysis, but I think looking at the same information, I've come to the conclusion that I will be supportive of this.
Thank you, Council Member Harding. Council Member Festerson, do you have your light on? Okay. I see the planning director's here, Mr. Fanslaw, if you'd come down. Do you have your packet for this item, or?
Up at my chair, yeah, Dave Fanslaw, City
I
Planning.
was just going to ask you if you had the overlay of the show, the zoning on the lots, the existing zoning, and what's around there, so we'd have some context.
You want to see zoning pattern?
Yes, please.
Let me see what we have. So I never do this. So where's this go?
Yeah. Zoom in, zoom out, there you go.
Yeah, so there you go. The project site is shaded, currently half zoned R7, half zoned R4. South of Davenport, you can see all but one lot is zoned R8. That one remaining lot is zoned R4. The block between 49th and 50th, you can see is kind of a hodgepodge, as well as north of Chicago.
So how is it that this happens? We have basically almost entirely R8 to the south. On the south side of Davenport, we have the vast majority on the north side of Davenport is R7, and then we have an R4 and an R5 in odd locations.
Well, it's probably a combination of things. It's mostly probably how the zoning was converted back in 1987 from the old zoning code to today's zoning code. So that's probably the large swaths, I imagine. Others could be results of other past rezonings.
And in terms of R8 across the street, what would be the maximum per acre density allowed? They could just come in and apply, pull a permit and build.
Yeah, 500. One unit would equal 500 square feet.
So approximately how many units could be in
Per
there?
acre, we do it on per acre, about 85, 86.
And then what would be the step down to the intensity of the R7 per acre?
It's 1,000, so it's about 42, 43 units per acre.
And do you know approximately what the breakdown is for square footage on this project as to its relation to acreage?
Site area per unit?
Yes.
Yeah, it's requires 1,000, like I said, for R7. The proposed project is 643.
And so in terms of the planning department's thought about its recommendation in favor of this, and the planning board, I was not at the planning board meeting. Tell me what your department's thought was and your recommendation in favor of this in the context of what we heard the neighborhood saying. And
Yeah, just like, you know, infill's not easy, right? Infill's
go ahead.
infill's not greenfield development, so we weigh a lot of things when we look at these projects. This particular site, it's not surrounded by predominantly single-family homes. There's a mix of uses along that street itself. Good and bad examples of projects, I would say, on this street between 49th and 50th. So we look at the surrounding context of the neighborhood. Like I said, it's not one use pattern, it's residential, but different types of residential. We weigh that with the plan itself for the project. We feel that it fits in. We look at the PUR, a tool that we put in place that Planning Board and City Council helped us put in place about 4 or 5 years ago, and weigh what the developer intends to do and proposes to do. Analyze it for that against that code to see, and there's a lot of good things built into the PUR design, density issues, urban design code. We'd like to make it walkable, PURs in walkable areas. This someday will be, once the urban circulator or the TOD gets going, this will be close to that transit investment that the city made in partnership with Metro. So there's a lot of good things going on along Dodge Street with the TOD and the BRT. We feel that this is appropriate for the neighborhood.
In terms of your department, you also have a historic division of architects and planners, right, that work in that area?
Correct.
And they're familiar with, undoubtedly, I think one of them even lives in Dundee.
Yes, he does.
And they participate in this departmental review and recommendation.
Correct, yes.
And in terms of the departmental position, would you characterize it as a consensus recommendation in favor, a majority, supermajority, unanimous?
Within the department?
Yes.
Well, ultimately, that's my decision. Yeah, staff has been on board. We've all worked together on this project just like we do other projects.
And then the planning board was unanimous?
It was.
7-0?
Correct.
Full board was present?
Correct.
One of the things that I think creates the, well, I'll call it heartburn for neighborhoods, whether it was Blackstone with the project that we heard recently on Dewey, or this one, is that I think people feel as though in neighborhoods, they don't understand the rules of the road. They, where is a high density TOD or PUR really appropriate to achieve the overall goals of the master plan in terms of transportation, the design, the environment, walkability, all those things. And mindful that there's an appropriate place for that development that'll help achieve the goals, and then overall through higher density we have presumably over time an eased burden for property taxes and other things, because the cost of government to operate per mile or per acre decreases with the more people paying in. But neighborhoods say, well, we're looking at single family homes right now like they were in Blackstone. And how could this possibly be surrounded by R8 and R7? And I don't have an answer for them. You didn't have an answer for them, because somehow in 1987, when the city adopted its zoning overlays.
Yeah, the new code.
The new code.
Sure.
We have the Sesame Street. One of these things just doesn't look like the others, right in the middle of Davenport Street on the north side, with R7 on either east and west and R8 to the south. So
Yeah, well, back in 80, I wasn't here in 87, missed it by a couple of years. It was comparable zoning. So what was now R8 was probably like R9. So the department compared the existing zoning on sites and found as close as a match as they could with what we use today. So it wasn't there was a lot of thought put into it. It was very thoughtful, and they were comparable. It wasn't like something went from high density to low density or vice versa. Then they matched it as best they could. So I would imagine prior to 1987, what you saw on that map was just a different nomenclature, but it was still high density residential and maybe some low density residential mixed in.
The council about approximately 3 years ago passed a resolution unanimously asking the planning department to update future land use map along mass transit routes.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Right.
But we really wanted a plan presented. We were told, okay, because of the scope and scale of what this involves, let's take the main spine of the mass transit corridor at the time of Dodge Street and develop that first. And TOD, or transit-oriented design, is coming along. But the thought at the time, I think echoed not just by me, or said by me and echoed by others, was we really need and would benefit from high-density mass transit line centered or focused development within a couple of blocks of that mass transit route. Now, this one is within 2 blocks.
Sure.
But the neighborhood struggles with feeling as though there's development creep that you'd have along and expect along the corridor itself and into the neighborhood. And it's one I struggle with. I mean, the development of Blackstone was more interior to the neighborhood.
Well, and we're mindful, if I can, we're mindful of that. So in the coming months, what this council can what you'll see is a zoning code that takes the more dense developments and puts them as close as possible on, we'll say, Dodge Street. But there's a walk shed involved with mass transit, so you just don't load up the abutting properties and call it quits, right? So you load up closest to the line and you taper back from there. So there will be, if passed, once we get it all put together in here in the next 4 or 5 months, there will be a new zoning option for people who live in that area. And so what we see is the density and the massing along Dodge Street won't be the same 3 or 4 blocks in. It'll step back to the neighborhoods and respect what's there now and what we think it should be in the future.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Deal, do you have anything you want to add to or respond to in what you heard from the neighbors or planning or any council members?
No, I don't.
Okay. Have you heard from your client as to whether he has anything he wants you to share on his behalf?
Jeff Deal, 1717 Vinton Street. I haven't heard from Steve. I know his intentions were to share that he's been a long-time neighborhood investor that takes care of his properties, and Dundee's important to them, as is a lot of the work that they've done in Omaha.
Thank you. Mr. Festerson, did you wish to?
I would just acknowledge that I have spoken with Mr. Elkin, and that's an accurate assessment that he is a longtime property owner in Dundee and has been a great partner in the business district. So I don't have any concerns about that or the fact that he's not here today and couldn't travel due to the circumstances. So I just wanted to reiterate that and that I agree with that. And then one last chance to see if Dan Rock was available on Zoom there, if that's going to work out.
We did communicate with him, and he messaged the city clerk that he had submitted a written position, and that was, he was comfortable with.
Okay, thank you.
Is that correct? Okay. What is the pleasure of the council? Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo.
Yes.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-1.
Thank you.
Item 18, a resolution to approve the Furniture Row Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Plan located at 119 North 72nd Street in an amount up to $2,861,000.
The public hearing on item 18 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yeah, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. The Furniture Row development is on the east side of 72nd Street, about a block north of Dodge. Dodge, 72nd Street, Crossroads Mall. This is the Crossroads Target. The subject site is occupied by this one-story retail building. It's been vacant for a number of years. It's an old furniture store. Presently looks like that. This is a J development project. Julie Stavniak and Jim Royer, the managers. They're going to rehab this existing building and repurpose it as a 2-level parking structure, and then build 158 apartment units above that. And this is again adding density on a site that's in proximity to a new orbit transit stop. Most of these are going to be studio units, 158 units, 135 of them are studios. The remainder are 1-bedroom units. Really takes an underutilized site and puts it to a good use. It's an appropriate land use for the area. It complies with the city's master plan, meets the requirements of the city's TIF program. It's an investment in the city of over $19 million. They're requesting $2,861,000 in TIF support.
Thank you, Mr. Seaton. We'll now go to the Zoom. We have Mr. Spellman from J Development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Don, thank you for introducing the project. Ryan Spellman here on behalf of J Development Company, 2430 South 73rd Street. I just wanted to thank the council for your support a couple of weeks ago for our PUR and ask for your support today for the TIF. This is another huge step in the right direction for this project and will help us get to that point where we can break ground, so to speak, and begin construction. And I'm just here to make myself available to any questions from the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents in attendance with the council chamber who wish to be heard? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson?
Thanks, Mr. President. We did cover this last meeting when we approved the PUR, but I don't think Ms. Stavniak was on the line there when we were discussing it, so I just wanted to thank her for her persistence with this site and getting it figured out after some changes had to be made to make it work. So I'm very much in approval of this $19 million reinvestment just across the street from Crossroads. And it'll be a welcome development, I think, for the surrounding vendors, but also the surrounding neighborhoods too. And I would note, this is also an example of our previous discussion about transit-oriented development, because this also would be in that area of conceived development in that land use plan. But I think the difference here for sure is that it's on 72nd Street and literally a half a block from what will be a new orbit station. So I think very, very appropriate in that respect. So with that, I'll go ahead and move approval.
Thank you. Councilmember Melton?
Thank you. And I'm not sure you can answer this, Don. I was just curious because I was looking here and here. These are market rate apartments, I assume, but what's the price range for these studios and one bedrooms? Does anybody know? And range, I mean, I'm just curious as to the affordability of these apartments at that area for, students at University of Nebraska, Omaha, or others.
If Ryan's available, I'll defer to him, but I've got it in my packet here. It'll take me just a moment to find it.
And I'm sure it's in here too. I was trying to find it.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. I was just waiting to be unmuted there. Yeah, certainly our goal with this project is to offer, high quality brand new housing, Class A multifamily project to folks at a price that's more of a, maybe you would consider in the workforce housing category. So to answer your question, our goal is to, have a range of somewhere between $750 to $900 per unit. We're really trying to keep all of them, including the one bedrooms, under $1,000 overall, and that would include, indoor parking as well. Trying to get to that point.
Okay, well, thank you. Then that's what I just wanted to get an idea of how affordable were these going to be at this area with all the places, which is great for UNO, and especially if you're going to have, kind of target transit tenants that would be using that. I just wanted to make sure that that price range would be something they could afford. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harding? Should be on.
I wanted to thank Ryan and Julie and John, as was alluded to. There were some roadblocks placed in your way. This is the second time through for this project. They had to go back and redesign it based upon some easements that were not able to be acquired. And a lot of people would have walked away from a project like this and gone on to the next, but they truly believed in the area. They truly believed in the product that will be offered to those that can live there. And I think the investment in that area and all what we hope happens with the rest of 72nd and Dodge is surely going to be an investment that will benefit not only the people who live and shop around there, but for the city as a whole. So I just wanted to thank J Development and their team again for their persistence in moving forward on this, and to know it'll be a successful project.
Thank you. Roll call.
Melton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Harding. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 18 is approved, 7-0. Item 19, a resolution to approve the HNHC Scattered Sites Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Plan for the various redevelopment project sites in an amount up to $275,000.
The public hearing on item 19 begins at this time. We'll first hear from the Planning Department. Mr. Seaton.
Yes, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. We'll move from a high-density TIF to a lower-density TIF now with the Holy Name Housing Scattered Sites Project. It's also an affordable housing development. Holy Name Housing has acquired a number of vacant parcels, kind of weedy, overgrown vacant parcels in the area of 33rd and Miami. So this is an infill housing project. These sites here are all single family. They're going to build 8 new single family homes. The larger site here, Miami and 34th Avenue, will be a 7-unit row home. Total project is about $4.5 million. They're requesting $275,000 in TIF support. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. We next have Mr. Gawley from Holy Name Housing Corporation.
Yes, this is Mike Gawley, Holy Name Housing, 4324 Fort Street. Like Don had said, these are 8 single-family homes that we will rent for 10 years, and then that tenant can buy those homes for whatever the home will appraise for in that area. And then the row housing that's at the southeast corner of 34th of Miami will be 7 row houses that we will rent out. They're 4-bedroom, 2-car garage row houses. I can certainly answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gawley. Do we have any other proponents in attendance who wish to be heard? Do we have any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Gray.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Mike Gawley and his Holy Name group for the extensive work that they continue to do in the community, specifically in North Omaha, the district that I represent in Northeast Omaha. I also want to thank them for the fact that a lot of the work that they do and a lot of the properties that they pick up are rather difficult properties to develop. And they take the opportunity and the time to do development in areas where I think a number of folks would have probably walked away from it. So I want to take the opportunity to thank Mike Gawley, his staff, and all of the people involved at Holy Name that continue to do this infill housing that is critically needed in the city of Omaha in general and in North Omaha in particular. With that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. No further lights. Roll call.
Melton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray.
Yes.
Harding. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 19 is approved, 7-0. Item 20, a resolution to approve the 3814 Leavenworth Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Plan located at 3814 Leavenworth Street in an amount up to $3,300,000.
The public hearing on item 20 begins at this time. We'll first hear from Ms. Hadley from the Planning Department.
Afternoon, Bridget Hadley, City Planning. So before you is another infill redevelopment project that serves to redevelop this vacant site that is here on your screen, shaded in the blue area. Here is Leavenworth, here is 38th Street, so it is at the corner of 38th and Leavenworth, and it is this L-shaped lot that's been vacant for a few years. There were a couple of structures there on the site that were demolished a couple of years ago. There was another project that was proposed. That project did not go forward, and now the owner-developer, who is represented by Zach Reinhardt, who is here, is proposing to go forward and to construct a 5-story multifamily market rate structure of 172 units of studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms. There will be 2 to 5 floors of housing above a two floors of enclosed parking, so a parking structure. And that parking structure would have about 150 stalls in the project. This group has met with the neighborhood, and that's my knowledge, that they have been meeting and have had meetings with the neighborhood association, and the association is on board with what is being proposed. The developer is proposing this, as I said, for housing to target the UNMC campus and all of the much-needed housing for the students and employees of the UNMC and Nebraska Medicine campus. What is proposed is $3.3 million in TIF for an investment of just over $28 million. Significant public improvements are a part of the project, over about $300,000 in public improvements for sidewalks and to bury an overhead line. With that, I would ask for your approval.
Thank you, Ms. Hadley. We next have Brian Acre representing the applicant with Holland Basham Architects.
Hi, Brian Ackert. Brian Ackert, 119 South 49th Avenue. I'm here on behalf of the applicant to see if there's any questions from the council or anybody else in the audience as far as architecture and designs considered.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents in attendance who wish to be heard? I see Mr. Reinhardt. He's got to bounce in his step after his.
Good afternoon, Zach Reinhardt, 1004 Farnham Street, Suite 400. Here is representing the applicant. We are developing 172 units of multifamily housing at this site. As Bridget mentioned, the former owner of the project, or of the site, had proposed a project, realized that it wasn't going to work for them, and we stepped in to develop. We're really proud of the design that we've come up with through the guidance of Council President Jerem and connecting us with the neighborhood association. We engaged them really early on in the design process to make sure that our project, that the building that we built fit the historic context of the neighborhood, presented a good gateway into the historic Blackstone neighborhood, and really engaged the neighborhood from the beginning. So I'm here to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reinhardt. Do we have any other proponents who wish to be heard? Do we have any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Harding. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 20 is approved 7-0. Item 21, a resolution to approve the Benson Theater Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Plan located at 6054 Maple Street in an amount up to $400,000.
The public hearing on item 21 begins at this time. We'll first hear from the Planning Department, Mr. Seaton.
Yes, thank you. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. The Benson Theater TIF project involves the building that was built in 1923, right in the heart of the commercial core of downtown Benson. It was built as a vaudeville theater. It's been vacant since 2010, so it's definitely an underutilized site. The building will be renovated and for use as a single-space public assembly space, emphasizing education activities during the day and entertainment activities in the evening. There are 15 leased parking spaces behind the site, and they have negotiated, the developer has negotiated shared parking with the Kavanaugh Law Firm and Emmanuel Lutheran Church as well. All parking's definitely tight in Benson. The developer is Kindare at Benson Theater, LLC. It's a small community-based nonprofit. Amy Ryan is the president of the LLC. Project has a total cost of just about $3.4 million. They're requesting $400,000 in TIF support. It's a good use and a good location. It'll be good to see the theater rehabilitated. Here's a drawing of the front elevation as intended to be when completed. And here we have the existing building and as envisioned. Complies with the city's master plan, meets the criteria of the TIF program, and we ask for your approval.
Thank you. Next proponent.
If I may. I know Amy Ryan is on the Michael Sands, 1700 Farnham Street, Suite 1500. I know Amy Ryan's on the calls, so is Sam Garden of CBRE. I don't believe that they wish to speak unless they have to, so I will take it upon myself to do so. Thank you, Don. Like Don said, it's a great project. There's a lot of worthy causes for TIF. This is one of them for certain. Like Don said, they will be running the theater, but they'll also be doing a lot of community-based and educational programming. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Sam and Amy are as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sands, and I understand from the clerk that they registered as available to answer questions. So,
correct.
Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized. The public hearing is closed.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, this is a great project in Benson and one that I've been involved with for a little bit, for a long period of time. And I just wanted to follow up a little bit on a few questions, I guess, for you, Mr. Sands, since I know Amy's on the line, and I want to recognize her too for this labor of love. She's put a lot of work into this, and it's great to see it come to this point, and I know we'll get this accomplished. I guess a few comments, and then I'll maybe ask you about timeline and how the fundraising is going.
Sure.
This is a missing link, I think, in Benson. It's not a current offering we have in the entertainment district there, and as was noted by Mr. Seaton, the great rehabilitation of a building that's been underutilized, but otherwise has a great history. And I'm glad you showed the rendering there, because it's going to look really great when we're done, including the old-fashioned sign there that was historic in nature too, and that I'm sure the planning department will give us waivers for. So Mr. Sands, can you just give us an update on how the project's going, the fundraising, the timeline for completion, all those things?
Sure. And so Amy, this has been a long time coming. She was actually had submitted or almost submitted for TIF about 2 years ago. Put it on hold for fundraising. Since that time, they've done a lot of capital campaigning, and they are at the point where really TIF is the last piece missing. So they have raised enough. They continue to raise for operating expenses. Obviously, as a nonprofit, they'll be able to raise some revenues from their endeavors, but a lot of that will continue to come in through the supporters. So they are ready to get building. It is fully funded pending TIF. They'll start building this summer, and they hope to complete the construction by. Things have gotten pushed back a little bit, but probably by next spring now.
Great.
So spring of 2021.
So open in 2021, which I think would be good timing, given the circumstances of everything else happening today. So they've raised almost $2.8 million, right? That's really impressive.
Yeah, close to it. And like I said, they continue to raise more for the operating expenses as well.
And should one want to contribute, where does one do that?
This might be where Amy Ryan wants to buzz in.
She's unmuted, so go ahead, Amy.
Hello, Amy Ryan, 8844 North 83rd Avenue. Yes, that is indeed bensontheater.org. You can check out the project, and we sure would love all the support, and really grateful for the opportunity to serve the community and create some economic growth in that really wonderful neighborhood.
Great. Thank you, Amy, and thanks for that information and all your work on this. Don, maybe one last question for you. For those that may be wondering how TIF applies to what is a nonprofit, can you explain how that worked in this case?
Well, even nonprofits have to pay taxes on income-generating properties, and it's same as any other property that pays taxes. With the TIF, you get two tax bills, one for the base and one for the increment or the increased amount of value that you've created. And the taxes you pay on the increment go to retire a loan or debt. In this case, it's kind of a self-financed type of TIF loan. They're not actually going to a bank for it. They're looking to a couple of major donors who will back them up.
So in essence, you're a nonprofit, but you're not tax exempt, which is the difference in this case with
Exactly.
this LLC. Right.
They still pay property taxes.
Right. Thank you.
TIF works.
And then one last question, either from Mr. Sands or Ms. Ryan. How are we doing on the alley and back? I know we've had some challenges there, and I saw it just the other day, and I know you're still working on it, right?
Michael Sands, 1700 Farnham Street. So that will be a part of the project, to do a lot of rehabilitation in that alley, and the public, a lot of the public improvements involve that. I will let Amy buzz in with respect to timeline or how that's progressing.
Go ahead, Amy.
Yes, thank you. The alley is looking really good. We were given permission to begin repairing that wall, and it is almost completed. So they're filling back in the alley there and working on also repairing the neighboring building to the east.
Great. Sounds
Yes,
good.
great. Thank you.
With that, I'll go ahead and move approval.
Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 21 is approved, 7-0. Item 22, a resolution to approve an amendment to the Downtown Northeast Redevelopment Plan.
Public hearing on item 22 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. The amendment to the Downtown Northeast Redevelopment Plan that you have before you allows the city to participate in a redevelopment of a parcel of property in the middle of downtown Omaha that has been significantly underutilized for a very long period of time. We've made a number of efforts to attempt to facilitate redevelopment, and I think we've got a project that is good, will be good for downtown, and we can move forward with. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 22 is approved, 7-0. Item 23, a resolution to approve a special use permit to allow a broadcast tower in the R6 district with a waiver to section 55-226 height to allow a 60-foot tall tower located north of George B. Lake Parkway and West Q Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on item 23 begins at this time. We have Kristen Rhymes for the applicant and then Tim Kelly.
Hi, Kirsten Rhymes with Edward Rose and Sons. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
And this is Tim Kelly as well, and I'm here. Any questions as well?
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 23 is approved, 7-0. Next, if we could vote on the waiver, City Council Liquor Rule 6 for items 24 to 29.
Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0. Item 24, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for Turf Club located at 2402 South 60th Street.
The public hearing on item 24 begins at this time. We'll call on Mr. Leon representing the applicant. Go ahead, Mr. Leon.
I'll send him a message.
Okay, Mr. Harrison, you're next.
Yes, that is me.
Would you provide your name, address, and I'm sure you're happy to answer any questions.
Yes, my name is Jeffrey Allen Harrison. My mailing address is 10915 Harrison Street, La Vista, Nebraska, 68128.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Second, roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 24 is approved, 7-0. Item 25, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for the Peregrine Hotel, Omaha Downtown, located at 203 South 18th Street. A's communication opposition.
The public hearing on item 25 begins at this time. We have the Whitney Gillings representing the applicant.
Hi, I represent the applicant, and I am here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 25 is approved, 7-0. Item 26, an application to consider a Class CK liquor license for J. Gilbert's Wood-Fired Steaks and Seafood, located at 1010 Capitol Avenue. A's communication from the applicant requesting an amendment to a Class C license.
The public hearing on item 26 begins at this time. We'll first call on Roland Day, the applicant.
Hey, my name is Roland Day, 316 Bryan Street, Gretna, Nebraska. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Can we do the amendment to a Class C?
Was the motion to approve the amendment to Class C?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Yes, motion to amend to Class C.
Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0.
Is there an as amended motion? Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0. Item 27, an application to consider a Class CK liquor license for Woolner's Neighborhood Grocery and Deli, located at 3253 Dodge Street. A's communication and support.
The public hearing on item 27 begins at this time. We have Andrew Beal representing the applicant at Walentine O'Toole. Mr. Beal?
And I think he might have left.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready. Mr. Beal? You may proceed, Mr. Beal.
I apologize, I got disconnected from the meeting momentarily, but I don't have a statement prepared. I'm just here more in an observational capacity, but happy to answer any questions that the council may have about this application.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 27 is approved, 7-0. Item 28, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for Little Ricky's, located at 148 South 39th Street. A's communication opposition.
The public hearing on item 28 begins at this time. We'll call on Mr. Kelly first for the applicant.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. Sean Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue, appearing on behalf of the applicant today. Just in response to the communication and opposition stating this operation will be a nuisance to the neighborhood, I just highlight this as 1,600 square feet, small venue, won't add to any additional foot traffic. In addition, the management group has operated a number of establishments in the area with no violations dating back to the earliest of March of 2012. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 28
Thank
is approved, 7-0. Item 29, a resolution to approve a Class IK liquor license for a venue on the Ridge located at 20033 Elkhorn Ridge Drive. A's communication from the Planning Department regarding a permit for the outdoor area.
Public hearing on item 29 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Contingent upon permits. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson.
30
This
and
is-
31.
Gray. Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
We will next proceed to the consent agenda resolutions. We've had requests to remove items 34 and 51 from consent. The public hearings on agenda items 32 and 3, as well as 35 through 50 and 52 through 69 begin at this time. If you wish to address the City Council regarding any of these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or opponent. The public hearing is closed. Yes. Is that the same with this second? Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
We'll next have the public hearing on item 34. It begins at this time. We have Melody from EHPV.
Yes, Mr. President, Melody Simzak with EHPV Lottery Services. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing on item 34 is closed.
And I believe she had the request to postpone this to the June 2nd meeting.
That's correct.
Okay. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
The public hearing on item 51 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Harding. Your light.
Sorry, that was.
Okay. Public hearing is closed.
We need a motion in a second.
Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Festerson abstains. Item 70, a resolution to approve the 2020 standard specification, standard plates, and the updated materials and testing manual for the Public Works construction.
The public hearing on item 70 begins at this time. Oh, it's closed. We have Mr. Fitzer available to answer questions and Mr. Kleffner from Public Works also to answer any questions. We have the Public Works Committee Chairman, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I do appreciate that we laid this over for, I believe, 3 weeks to dig in a little deeper. There are still some questions that the Public Works Committee has. So what we have decided to do is to place this on file. That's my motion.
Any further lights? Roll call.
Melton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Harding. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 71, an ordinance to accept the bid from All Seasons Turf and Tree LLC in the amount of $168,406.56 for grounds maintenance of right-of-ways.
The public hearing on item 71 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 72, an ordinance to accept the bid from Macon Enterprises LLC in the amount of $27,610 per year for mowing of the Missouri River Flood Levee for a term of June 1, 2020 to December 1, 2021.
The public hearing on item 72 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 73, an ordinance establishing the North 24th Street Business Improvement District. A is communication and support, B is communication opposition.
The public hearing on item 73 begins at this time. We have a proponent, Tricia Patterson. You're good to go, Ms. Patterson.
Hi, everyone. I've actually never been to one of these meetings before, so I'm here to observe and to introduce myself. My name is Tricia T. Patterson. I'm the president and owner of NIA Insurance Agency. We've been established since April of 2011. I'm located at 5119 Leavenworth right now, and I just purchased 2 lots at North 24th Street at 1847 and 1839 through the Omaha Land Bank. And these are 2 vacant parcels. And so I'm working with CNA survey to turn this into one address right now. I am looking to, well, what I do actually, I provide insurance services, auto, home, business, including motorcycle, boat, commercial, bonds, events. I also provide notary services and would like to be back in the community. I was formerly located at 2816 North 24th Street for 9 years. We have a lot of customers out of that area, over about 3,000 customers. We service the whole state of Nebraska, Iowa. I also do Colorado and Texas. So I have a pretty large customer base that I've developed over the actually past 9 years. And just wanted to set up an attractive building, multi-use building on that corner that would offer insurance services. I also, the multi-use building I want to develop, multi-use building that would provide a classroom that would have entrepreneur services as well as my insurance services.
All right, Ms. Patterson, so you were a proponent for the Business Improvement District?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll next call on other proponents for the Business Improvement District.
Good afternoon, Council. Lavanya Goodwin owns several properties in the district. I'm representing Goodwin Spencer Street Barbershop, 3116 North 24th Street. I'm also the board president for the recently appointed board of the Business Improvement District. And I just wanted to say that over the last about 18 months, starting in 2018, we began to work with the property owners within the district to decide if the BID was a good fit for North 24th Street. And we have a lot of support from not only our board members, but also the various commercial property owners in the area. In that time, we've also worked very closely with planning as an advisory on the Forever North study, which will soon become an adopted plan that will help to look at the rezoning of the area, look at multimodal transportation, and as well as housing density. Not to mention working very closely with planning on some sidewalks improvements in the area. So we're already putting the work in. One of our initial plans is litter control, and we plan to implement a plan that will not only manage the area, but also provide oversight for nuisance weeds and landscaping. But not to mention, very closely, second and third in line is a streetscape plan and a facade improvement plan. As we all know, North Omaha it's now time for revitalization. We've seen revitalization on North 30th Street. So the BID will represent a partner on North 24th Street in which the city of Omaha can look to not only for oversight and governance, but also implementation of the necessary revitalization measures for the area. I am here for any additional questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're already attracting new investments, like we just heard from.
Absolutely.
Great. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me say, first of all, that we have a couple of council members here who have been involved in the establishments of BIDs in their particular districts, and I know that you too appreciate how difficult this is at some point in time as we begin to put this together. The 24th Street BID was an effort that was started, as Lavanya said, about 18 months ago. Actually was talked about before that, but we actually started working on it about 18 months ago. And I wanted to, just take this opportunity to thank Lavanya Goodwin and her team of board members and volunteers and others who have spent a yeoman's amount of time working on this business improvement district to make it come to reality. And the fact that we already have someone who's interested in investing and took the time to testify today is testimony to the fact that, if we work hard and if we stay connected, we can develop not only North Omaha and bring it back to the glory years that it had, but we can enhance this entire city if we can continue to work together and stay focused and do what is necessary to take care of one another. And I would like to thank, I didn't get her name, but the woman that wants to build a building in that area to support insurance as well as entrepreneurship building, something that is critically needed in our community. So just wanted to take the opportunity to thank all of those involved because, those of you who have established BIDs know how difficult this work can be. So again, thank you, and next week I will make a motion to approve. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Councilmember Gray stated, that the importance and the success that we've seen using the BID in other areas of town like Dundee and Benson and Elkhorn and I can't and
Blackstone.
Blackstone. And I think Councilmember Palermo's working in those efforts as well too. So I'm very excited to see this move forward, and I'll be supportive of it. I did have one question. I was a little confused because I thought Ms. Goodwin said she was the president of the BID, but I didn't, and talked about the board, but this is the establishment of the BID, and I thought maybe I missed something. Was there somehow a board appointed prior to the establishment?
Yes, there was council member Harding, and Mr. Indenbosch, I think, is with us if he wants to give the history of that. Or
the process to create a business improvement district requires the first thing that the council has to do. What the council has to do is you appoint a business improvement area board, and that board is the one that then gets the consensus of the neighborhood and makes the recommendation. And then makes the recommendation to recommend a business improvement district, which is the actual thing, the actual entity that has a budget and defined functions. So the board was created roughly 6 months ago, I believe. Ms. Goodwin was involved in the grassroots movement before that, and she is the president of the Business Improvement Area Board. Assuming the council approves this, we will now have a business improvement district, which will be governed by the Business Improvement Area Board.
Okay, thank you. And I realize that. I just wanted that clarification made because at some future point then, I believe it's the mayor makes recommendations as to who's on the board, and then that comes to the council for approval. So I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President, and I believe in this tool, the Business Improvement District throughout the city, as has been noted. It's been proven successful in many, many areas, and I've always thought it would be a great addition to both North and South 24th Streets. So I want to congratulate Councilman Gray and Ms. Goodwin for all your work on this. It is a lot of work to get to this point. This is the hard part, but you have great consensus, as is evidenced by a lot of support here today and no opposition. That's hard to do with something like this, especially along such an expansive area as you have chosen to cover. So I know you'll be successful. I see that the way this one is drawn up, you'll have a budget of about $21,500, and it does sunset in 3 years, which I think is reasonable. But I'm quite confident after 2 or 3 years, you'll be able to demonstrate some great results. And I bet you your members will be thinking about having a bigger budget next time to get even more done. So good luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Festerson. I would echo those comments, because in Blackstone, when it first started, there were some skeptics that said, you know, let's have this sunset period so that you can prove your value to us. And the starting budget, believe it or not, was $17,500 there. And now look at it. Not only is it the budget significantly increased, there's, you know, I think over $100 million investment and hundreds of new jobs, and the neighborhood came back to expand the boundaries of the business improvement district. So if what's happened in other areas, like you've heard other council members talk about, that have happened in their districts, this happens in your community, we're all for it, and we'll wish you the best of luck. Roll call.
Item 74, Midwest DCM appeals rejection of their bid from April 22nd, 2020 for the Charles Street Public Improvements Project.
The bid appeal of the Midwest DCM has registered Russ Cooper. And we're first.
Good afternoon.
What is the basis of your appeal, Mr. Cooper?
I guess what we feel is an informality. Russ Cooper, 8719 South 135th Street. And we're appealing the city's decision to reject, the competitive bid and to rebid the project at hand. Per Addendum 1, which stated that bidders must provide a copy of the approved MBE WBE participation plan to all businesses providing goods and or services to the project. And we feel that we had done that. We actually solicited to engineering services, excavation companies, and even our own concrete paving competition prior to the bid. Personal opinion, but I don't feel that it was the intention of that addenda to include services not related to a paving project, such as roofing contractor, painting companies, or janitorial services. These trades, they wouldn't have had any reason to participate in a particular project as their scopes are not included.
Is there anything else you wish to add before we hear from the city's representative?
Not at this time.
Thank you. We'll next hear from Mr. Lukash.
Yeah, Bill Lukash, Omaha Planning Department. Thank you very much. I think the MBE WBE plan was not the issue. I think it's, I'm going to put up a...
If you could pull the mic over, please.
Do what? I'm sorry?
It'll move over. Just move the microphone with you.
Okay, there you go. So it's actually the Section 3 policy. It's been a while since I was here last time talking about Section 3. In that time, the City Planning Department has gone to great lengths to clarify, streamline, and make abundantly clear, and done a lot of outreach about Section 3. Even hired Alyssa Solacek here in the Planning Department to help with Section 3 process. Number 4, which is one of the reasons we rejected the bid, covers Section 3, and about halfway down that paragraph it says, therefore all contractors must notify all Section 3 business concerns in the Omaha Council Bluffs metropolitan area presented on the HUD website, Section 3 website. The reason we did that, he's exactly right, that there are businesses on there that do not sign up to do concrete work, for example. They sign up to do janitorial services and that kind of stuff. The reason that we want businesses, contractors, to reach out to everybody are twofold. One, everybody needs to know about these opportunities. If we restrict the flow of information about bidding opportunities, then businesses that are operating or businesses that are starting up don't know that there may be a lot of work in concrete, for example, or something else. So we want to get the word out there that there's opportunities for people through these government contracts. The second thing, honestly, is this is taken from 24 CFR Part 35, 135, excuse me.
Zoom on top of the...
Zoom, I thank you very much. In HUD's code, one of the things that they provide about Section 3 is examples of efforts to award contracts to Section 3 business candidates. They really give a lot of flexibility to the local jurisdiction to craft their own Section 3 plan. And while I'm here, I know there was some confusion about this last time, but the City of Omaha has a Section 3 plan, and the Omaha Housing Authority has their own Section 3 plan. They are not exactly the same, but that was a source of confusion last time. I just wanted to clarify that point. Number 6 there, an example that HUD gives is providing written notice to all known Section 3 businesses concerns of the contracting opportunities. This notice should be in sufficient time to allow for the Section 3 business concerns to respond to the bid invitation. So between those two reasons, this example that HUD gave, also we want to make sure that everybody is finding out about these opportunities. There are businesses on HUD's website that might be a general contractor, doesn't necessarily concrete. There might be a drywaller, doesn't necessarily concrete. But if we do 10 projects of 10 concrete projects in a year, maybe they start to think, well, maybe I should be in the concrete business, or maybe my friend is in the concrete business. So it's really an opportunity to get the word out to businesses, to give them an opportunity. And so we've made that part of our checklist for government requirements right here, along with many other things to help Section 3 businesses and all businesses bidding on federal contracts understand what their requirements are. And for that reason, we rejected the bid.
Thank you.
Well, not that one alone, I'm sorry.
Did Ms. Silhacek wish to say anything?
Would you like to say anything? Yes, not.
Happy to answer any questions.
Yep, happy to answer any questions.
All right. Mr. Cooper, you've heard the city's response. Did you want a minute for rebuttal?
I don't. I just want everyone to understand that, when, we're a small business, and obviously, the pandemic has affected the company, and it prior to submitting bids on projects like this, a company like ours spends thousands of dollars in resources preparing competitive bids for the taxpayers of, the city of Omaha. And, rebidding this not only puts our company at a disadvantage, but it does the same to those that bid the project back on April 22nd. Our numbers are now public knowledge, and I guess for those reasons, I ask that the council allow a repeal and reward to Midwest DCM, the original low bidder for the Charles Street project.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the council? Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Mr. Cooper.
Cooper, I'm sorry.
You're
Sorry.
recognized. Go ahead.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
And I understand your point, and I understand right now, during this time spending money on bids, we've had this happen before, and we kind of say it whenever these bids come up. We have to kind of enforce these bid terms uniformly, regardless of maybe some arguments that maybe it should have, you read it wrong, or somebody forgot to insert something. So I understand your point, but the council does have to be consistent with what we do, especially with these bids. And so that would be the reason why I believe we've denied it today. It's a requirement in the bid. If the requirement's not met, we have to deny the appeal. Otherwise, will be inconsistent moving forward. So
Sure.
I do wish you the best, and it looks like the project is gonna have to be rebid, and I hope you will do that since you've already put some resources into this bid. Thank you. Thank you,
Indeed.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
Item 75.
Item 75, BJ's Fleet Wash. From April 8th, 2020 for the custodial services for park facilities rebid project. A is a request from the applicant to withdraw the appeal.
Is there a motion? Second, roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Non-action items, items 76 through 88 do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Mr. President. Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 3:46.